what I want to start off with is I'm going to write things on the board on two sides. I'm going to try and do it that way. And we'll be talking about terminology, where words come from, words we take advantage of, take for granted every day, angel, demon, shadow, God, stuff like that, where they actually come from. And you'll be surprised to realize that most of the words that you take for granted every day in that particular sense all came from an extraterrestrial source, an extraterrestrial dialect, okay? But aside from that, what I'll do is kind of like split things into two on either side of the board. This side will be symbolisms relating to the Moorish legacy. This side will be symbolisms relating to the Masonic agenda, okay? In fact, I will do that right now. Moorish legacy and Masonic agenda. I have to tell you guys, I'm in my glory tonight. I actually have a board to draw on Masonic. I never get that. I have to always wing these things from the hip, and hope I get it right. Which is another reason why I have the syllabus, because it serves as a traveling chalkboard. Okay. So how did all this stuff start? Well, in terms of the cosmology of it all and how it got to the point, the concept being flesh and bone versus wood and stone, or in terms of the Moorish legacy, the lamp of illumination versus the iron hand of oppression. Okay? Lamp of illumination versus iron hand of oppression. Flesh and bone, wood and stone. Okay? Some time ago, which is an understatement, you guys will realize I'm horrible with dates. Do not ask me to date something. You'll have to figure that out yourself. I like chronology, but I do not like dating, because our dating system sucks anyway. And when we try to date things, this is when we get into screaming matches because someone's dating system wasn't correct in the first place. So how the hell can you place dates on something? I can use a vagary of like 500,000 years ago to 76 billion years ago, but who can relate to that? And if you can't relate to it, then why the hell bother asking? Okay? I'm lucky if I can remember 10 years ago, all right? But the situation was this. There was a kingdom called the Aryans, okay? And the kings, spelled like this, Aryans, okay? Aryan, singular. The kings wanted to expand the empire, okay? Now you're going to use, I have to, in terms of linguistics right off the bat, okay? I'm going to tell you two terms that come from this. Can you guys see one already? Aryan, okay. That one will go down here. Aryan, as in Aryan super race. And you're going to notice that there's always, with these bastards, there's always a favoritism towards the pale skin, okay? All right? Aryan. And up here, Orion. This is where the term Orion comes from. I had to bring that up now because I'm going to use the phrase Orion Empire, and you needed to know that I'm really talking about the Aryan Empire, okay? This is where scientists get the word Orion, constellation, which doesn't come from science. It comes from Native Americans and Native Africans, okay? All right? Just look into the Dogon tribe, all right? So science does not get this stuff by itself. It goes to people of color and hue and then claims it as its own. All right? The Orion Empire, which is already big enough, wanted to expand its borders some more. So they start pushing outward, and the kings are happy with how far it goes. Okay? And after a while, after a while, they're pretty happy with what they've done. Okay? But the thing was, along the way, they started teaching it to the women, the queens. Okay? Now, the queens, got to remember, we're talking about the female side of the species. In any case, the queens got a taste for this. Okay? And it turned out they really liked doing this whole expanding the empire and running the operation type thing. And they realized they could do it even better than the kings, because the kings got, they figured, oh, we have enough, who cares? The queens got hungry and wanted to go further and further, okay? This is interesting in terms of, once again, the corporate structure. Keep it in the back of your mind. You'll notice in corporate America, there's this one white chairman, CEO at the top, and the people looking through the glass ceiling are a whole bunch of female VPs surrounding him. And the reason he surrounds himself with female VPs is because the women will work twice as hard as the male VPs to accomplish what the head honcho white CEO wants. And they'll keep looking through the glass ceiling because he keeps promising them things that'll never come true. This is repeated over and over again in the Masonic structure of lodges, where you have the white Freemason and the female Masons thinking they're equal. If you go to any country club, how is it split up? The men go upstairs, the women go downstairs. Okay? That country club split, I know this for a fact because I was a waiter at one of these ritzy country clubs on the North Shore of Long Island. I saw this for myself. This was during the 90s. This is, we're approaching the 21st century, and these country clubs are still segregated like this because the country club mentality is the Masonic mentality. All right? This is why all the country clubs are all Christian, in some cases Jewish, okay? Christian and Jewish country clubs, all right? You don't see any black country clubs like that or Native American country clubs. In fact, if it was Native American, the women would be on top because they're held in high regard and they're the ones that make all the rules and the decisions. So it's only in white America that you see this ass-backwards function where women are forcibly subjugated onto their knees, all right? So in any case, the women got a taste for this, and they decided to take over the operation. The kings were like, all right, go ahead, do it. They were happy with what they had. They didn't care. So the queens take over. Now, these was an elite group of queens who really got into this, and they were called the Sata queens. Now, can you see what's going to come out of that already? Okay? Think about it. There's two things that come out of this. Being that they were such wretched bastards to begin with, you've got an ancient reference that comes out in the Jewish Torah called Satan, okay? And of course, Nazi Germany had a very close affinity with the Anunnaki, who served these guys. So from here, you get the Schutzstaffel, SS, all right? So, keep in mind, the things I've learned over the last 16 years or so makes it very difficult for me to look at the Nazi Party in black and white anymore. There are a lot of fantastic, awesome things they were trying to do, but absolute power corrupts absolutely, and it went the wrong way. It was done that way and sabotaged on purpose, all right? To their credit, the Nazis hated the Masons with a vengeance and wanted to hunt them all down. You don't do that to upper management, okay? Masons are upper management, okay? The Masons are upper management. The Nazis were middle management trying to become the new upper management. And upper management said, fuck that, okay? All right? So that's what happened to the Third Reich. Upper management stepped on them, all right? And once you understand it from that, it becomes very hard to just say, oh, well, the Nazis were all bad when there was this other hypocritical bullshit going on in the background, all right? We see that history, just jumping ahead a little bit, history repeating itself again. We're so busy pointing fingers at Nazis and saying, oh, they're all bad. Well, they're the ones that gave us our space program. If there were no Nazis, there'd be no 1969 going to the moon, okay? On top of that, because we refuse to learn from history the right way, that Nazi Party and all the bullshit that went with it has now come back in the form of neocons. Here, George Bush pulled the same shit that Hitler tried to pull, and in bombing the World Trade Center, they bombed upper management. upper management once again said, fuck that, okay? And stepped on Bush, stepped on his administration. You notice all of his kingpins have been taken away from him. And now he's backed into a corner like a lame duck president, okay? And it really wasn't his, he used to, But, this is what happens, we're so busy pointing fingers at imaginary bad guys, we seem to forget the fact that the bad guys are here, okay? Power moves across the planet like a vortex, okay? Case in point, what is New York City will eventually become Hong Kong, China, okay? Power moves like a vortex, and after because the World Trade Center was the center of Western power for the Illuminati and the Western arm of power for the World Trade Organization. Going after that totally overstepped their bounds, and the neocons knew they bit off more than they could chew. Okay? But I throw these things in there so that you understand the full corporate structure of what's happening on the planet and how everything repeats itself in the grand scheme of things. All right? So the Satar queens are going out there pushing out. Now, of course, through this expansion, they end up associating themselves with another empire, a younger empire, but just as vicious, hostile, and powerful. And that other younger empire was known as the Canis. Okay? So you got the Canis Empire. The Orion Empire, the Canis Empire. Canis is what you refer to as Syrians. Okay? From Canis, what does it look like? 2 words. Canis, they were what you refer to today, if you were to see a dog walking on 2 legs, bipedal canines. Okay? From Canis, you get canine, and you also get cannibal. Okay? Now, the reason you get cannibal is not just because of the linguistic connection, but also because the Canis Empire had an elite group of warriors called the Dukes. Okay? So from there, you have Dukes. It was spelt like this, D-K, because remember, vowels are just a crutch. If you're going to learn about language, you're going to realize vowels are absent from ancient history, okay? Because remember, language comes from Sanskrit first and then is translated to written, tablets, papyrus, paper, okay? Duk, okay? They were known as, you're going to like this, they were known as the Dukes of War. This is where Shakespeare got the phrase dogs of war. From Duk, you get the term dog. They were Syrians, and this is how they can become known as the dog race. So from Duk, you get the word dog. Dogs of war, Dukes of war. And the cannibalism part, coming from the name, also came from their method of warfare, which was just to simply eat the enemy right on the battlefield. Okay? Now, if you're going to run a corporation, you can't eat the employees, okay? So the Satar queens, went to the Canis feudal lords, once again, the ultimate form of government being feudalism everywhere. This democracy will go back to feudalism, like it or not. The Aryans, trying to run an establishment here and in a relationship with them, they were feuding with each other, and they realized it's more profitable to work together, okay? What you see, the friction between these two is no different than the friction that was caused during the Civil War in this country, and the only reason the Civil War was brought to an end was because it was more economically feasible to bring it to an end. No one was making money off the war, so it was time to bring it to an end. Here, they were losing money, destroying everything in sight, laws of supply and demand. There comes to a certain point where war starts destroying the profits that you initially started the war for in the first place. Then you need to stop it. So they decided it was more profitable to work together. And this is when the Aryan Empire and the Canis Empire, the Syrians, Orion, joined forces, tentatively working together. It's not like they were hugging each other and kissing, okay? What happens is that because the Satar queens were spreading so far out, this relationship here between the younger and the older empire began what is now known today as the two-party system. This is the original two-party system right here, okay? Now, In that two-party system, somebody makes the rules and the other one carries out the dirty work. The Sata queens made the rules, passed the laws, decreed. The Canis carried out the dirty work. They were the feudal lords, okay? Feudal lords. What's interesting is that as I go along in this lecture, you will also see me interspersing references and symbolisms from the Invisible College. Art, literature, film, okay, science fiction, in a lot of cases. These feudal lords you see depicted in Stargate SG-1 or the movie Stargate, those feudal lords, okay? Here, you're talking about if you're looking for good depictions, the Satas, the reptilians, there's this great bounty hunter played a very small role in Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. Bosk, the reptilian who's standing right there next to Boba Fett. That's your reptilian, okay? Here, dogs of war, Syrians. You ever see the movie The Howling? They stand on two legs. You see them stand up like that? That's your Syrian, okay? That's how scary it gets seeing these damn things. Imagine the bounty hunter and one of those werewolves, okay? From these feudal lords, there was, of course, where the term comes from, feuding. The Syrians being a younger empire, they also feuded amongst themselves. Why? Because they were vying for favoritism from the Sata queens, okay? The Sata queens decided to pick one over all others, and they favored him over all others. And that one that they picked was known as Anu. Okay, the Syrian feudal lord Anu. All right? Now, from Anu, since Anu was favored by them, it made it much easier for, as you see with the mafia or any kind of criminal organization, what do you do first? You want a monopoly, you eliminate the competition. But you need backing from the crime syndicate to do that. This was the crime syndicate that backed up Anu, gave him carte blanche to go out and kill off all the other feudal lords, eliminating the competition. And what was he doing that for? Why was he favored? Okay, with the expansion of the empire came the discovery of this solar system, okay, in a much younger state of existence. And what made it so fantastic to discover was because, once again, concept, wood and stone, they discovered rich and valuable tradable resources within the kingdom. And when I use the term kingdom, kingdom is supposed to reference solar system, okay? When in any kind of Gnostic or religious literature, when you see the word kingdom, they're talking about solar systems, okay? And in each and every solar system, no different than real estate here on one planet, okay? In each and every solar system, in keeping with the idea of feudal structure, corporate structure, there was always one planet that's going to be used as the throne of power. In this case, it's Earth. Earth is the throne of power. This goes a hell of a long way to explaining why they are so interested in coming here to this backwater system, okay? And a lot of the naysayers and academics are like, why would they come here if we're such a bunch of ignoramuses and we're only interested in tribal warfare? That's the best we can do at this point. I mean, we started off the 21st century with a bang, literally, by going and invading the Middle East. That doesn't really exactly speak well of alien contact. So, but this planet is the throne of power, so it has to be given that due respect first, and this is where you get all the wars and the feuding over controlling this throne, because legally, by feudal law, when you control the throne, you control all the other commodities within that system, within that kingdom, in this case, the other planets, the other real estate, okay? This is also what made this solar system something worth fighting over, because of all the rare and rich and valuable tradable commodities that were found here. And of course, it's because of the ambition of the females that this system was found at all, okay? But them being the elitist pigs that they are, they're not going to get their hands dirty by doing the work themselves. Why? Because in this two-party system, they are upper management, they are middle management. Middle management gets stuck with the job of doing the dirty work, okay? Middle management, this is why they favored him, okay? They bloated his ego and said, you're the one we want. Meanwhile, they just wanted some lackey to do the work. So they sent him down. Now he's King Anu, so of course he too is not going to get his hands dirty. What does he do? He sends his vicious, sadistic pig of a son called Enlil. Okay? So from Anu, you get Enlil. Prince Enlil. King Anu, Prince Enlil. Okay? Now, Enlil did not want to come here. But this shows you how powerful the treaties and agreements and feudal law is between these two empires, to the point where he could force his son to do this, or else you're dead. Okay? When they come knocking on your door and say, you go here, you go, otherwise you get your throat slit. Enlil, under protest, came down to this system, and his job was to basically, mine the tradable commodities within this solar system. He didn't want to be here. He had his own form of middle management. Okay? He had, based on Anu's name, he had the Anunnaki. Okay? Now what's interesting about this is that if we can split this, but linguistically, if we can split this down the middle, all right, Anunnaki, Anu's faithful, okay? All right, because of King Anu, all right? Well, that leaves us with the second half here. Now, I can only say this just on intuition alone. I find it quite interesting that Naki, you have the Third Reich associating themselves with this cosmology as being the rightful heirs to the throne. From Naki, you get a mispronunciation, Nazi. Okay? Can't prove it, but it's a strong intuition, something to think about, all right? Anu's Naki, Anu's Nazis, all right? And they talked about the Anunnaki all the time. They were very into that stuff, all right? For better or worse, they knew all about this stuff. So, Anu comes around using the Anunnaki, okay, to start digging out the rich and raw materials from the mines. Coal, diamonds, gold, okay, silver, copper, nickel, all right, all that stuff. Anunnaki, though, they're like royal guards. They are elite warriors, okay? They've been busy fighting with the reptilians. Now all of a sudden they're denigrated to slave labor. This pissed them off, okay? Remember, Enlil is playing the role of upper management, Anunnaki playing the role of middle management. There's always the two-party system here, okay? Always that kind of structure. If upper management wants to remain upper management, they got to keep middle management happy. Middle management's now ready to revolt, pissed off, like, we don't have to do this slave labor. You're making us do something that is totally out of our rank, all right? So, Enlil goes back to his father and says, I'm having a problem here. We're going to lose this system if we don't get this under control, because the biggest problem here is that this needs to be kept under control so that the queens don't get pissed off. And the reason you don't want the queens getting pissed off is because you got to keep the paycheck going to the queens, because if they get mad, they come down, kill everybody, game over, okay? Like I said, it wasn't profitable to keep a war going with the reptilian empire. It was profitable to work with them, all right? And Anu already had his ego inflated by being the favored feudal lord over all others. So, of course, he wasn't going to screw this around. He stepped on his son and he says, get it under control. The son says, I can't. Do something or we're going to be in big trouble. So this is when Anu sends his other children down there, Enlil's siblings, okay? Two others, brother and sister, sends down Prince Ea, okay? And sends down Ninhursag, Princess Ninhursag. This relationship here between brother and sister, okay, even though they were all siblings, he was on one side of the issue. What you see happening here is, as we go along in the discussion, is eventually you're going to realize what gives birth, the feud between him and these two gives birth to this and this. Okay, that's why I had the two split up like that. Prince Ea is brought in with his sister because the two of them worked together as master geneticists. In other words, the definition of a true god. Okay, and their job was to go into the biological environment of the given planet and create the perfect obedient slave from that environment, because it was realized early on that if you try bringing slaves from another system into an alien system, you have a revolt, you have a psychological snap, you have an emotional breakdown because they're in an alien environment. So you can't just import slaves from another system. It doesn't work. Slaves have to be fostered from the given indigenous environment. This is what makes them so damn valuable, because you have to put effort into genetically enhancing and modifying that raw genetic material that already exists. And when I say raw genetic material, I'm talking about primate ancestors. Okay? You see this same issue repeating itself with the Philadelphia experiment. These poor dumb suckers in the Navy who were thrown on that boat. Why did they lose their mind? Because they were warped into an alien environment. Okay? This was not respected, and the experiment went belly up. All right? But they knew about it. They understood psychology real well. There's two other things I want you to keep in mind in terms of the Moorish legacy. Okay? Eventually we'll come to these terms, but I'll put it on here now. Guerrilla warfare. In other words, the underground. And the Masonic method of warfare, which is psychological. Yeah, I can spell. Logical warfare. Okay? This one usually overpowers because you have the iron hand of depression, but this one is a thorn in everyone's side. Okay? So this is where you'll get this thing going on, the psychological warfare versus guerrilla warfare. All right? We'll get to how that term came into existence. So you got these two, Master Genesis, brother and sister, okay? And they're working on creating the perfect beast. And they go through several experiments that are failures. And they're like, we're having a problem here. They couldn't get the beast, because the thing is, you need to create the perfect beast. And of course, this goes back to what I said before, 666, 777, 888, the beast versus godhood, consumer slave versus master investor. Here's where we get the beginning of the beast. And the beast was called the Adapa. Okay? Linguistically, look at what's in here. Adapa. That which mimics. From apa you get the word ape. Okay? Ape. Okay? As in Planet of the Apes. Which is also a very good piece of invisible college materials. Boatloads of symbolism in all of the Planet of the Apes movies. Now, what had happened was they were trying to get to this, and they were having problems. They couldn't get the damn thing to be smart enough to obey commands without being too smart to think, therefore I am. That would have pissed off Enlil, because he was the one put in charge of the operation. Okay? To make the Anunnaki happy, Prince Ea, Princess Ninhursag, their sole job was to give the Anunnaki and Enlil good obedient slaves so that middle management would stop revolting and the paycheck would start flowing to the queens again. So they finally, the thing is, in order to get to this point, they kept experimenting. Prince Ea was at his wit's end. All of a sudden, Princess Ninhursag calls him over one day. He says, brother, come here a minute. She's got a smile on her face. She figured out something at the bottom of the test tube. She finally figured out the proper genetic formula for creating the perfect Adapa. So what does this really mean? You have this brother and sister relationship, male and female. It was a woman that created man, and it was a man who put his seal of approval on it. Okay? This ends this long, ridiculous argument, is God a man or a woman? God is both the man and the woman, represented by the yin-yang relationship, which doesn't necessarily have to do with sexual relations between men and women. It has to do with the brother and sister relationship of godhood. Okay? The power to create life from the given environment, from the raw genetic material, which was the Adapa. And what you have with the Adapa is this overgrown ape-like thing that could stand upright. That was a key thing. Why? Because if you look at our primate cousins today, they can't stand upright because the muscles in their hind quarter and in their pelvic bone won't allow them to. They can do it for maybe a couple minutes, but that's it. They don't have the muscular structure. So one of the adaptations that had to be made, or modifications, was to create the beast with the lower leg power to lift. They already had the upper body strength, which was tremendous, okay? This is why chimpanzees are so damn volatile, and you hardly see them in movies, as opposed to orangutans, which are much more docile. Chimpanzees will kill you, okay? And that was the biggest mistake that was made here, was that primate ancestor to us on the chimpanzee was chosen, okay? So not only do you get the obedient adapa, but eventually along the way, there's that other hot-blooded essence running through that it eventually contributes to rebellion, okay? So the Anunnaki start employing the slaves, the adapas, our primate ancestors, to go to work in the mines. So the Anunnaki are using the apes. Now, on the word of Enlil, being the hump that he is, the Anunnaki are working the adapas to the bone into the ground, killing them off literally left and right. Now, Ea and Ninhursag have just put their blood, sweat, and tears into this creation. They have, allegedly, a certain amount of compassion that they develop for the creation, as any artist or god would towards his piece of artwork, okay? So they start getting rather pissed off at the way their hostile, sadistic pig of a brother is driving them into the ground. So Ea decides, wait a minute, I'm putting all this damn effort into this thing. I want some for myself, okay? And this is what begins the so-called original sin, because now he's beginning to disobey feudal law, because there's a feud between him and him. Why? Well, he's in charge. By feudal law, he's the older prince, the older brother. He has to be in charge. He doesn't want to be, though, which produces a sadistic hostility towards the adapa. On the other hand, he's the one that creates them. He's the master geneticist. He feels that he should be in charge and wants to take over. Okay? So you got this magnificent Shakespearean drama developing here, that's very similar to the shenanigans you read about in Hamlet and Macbeth and so forth. So he sets a plot in motion. Now, Enlil had already established no beast would be taught forbidden knowledge. This is why they had to be engineered to obey simple commands. Lift, shove, push, nothing else, okay? But smart enough to remember those robotic commands, okay? So that they didn't have to be retaught every damn time. Ea says, screw that. He starts taking a certain group of them under his own wing, okay? Them forbidden knowledge. But he's got to get the beast evolved a little more modified, because remember, they just got finished creating a beast that wasn't supposed to understand anything more than simple commands. So what he does is both he and his sister Ninhursag have a rather interesting relationship with another extraterrestrial race, okay? And that particular extraterrestrial race, put this over to here, is known as the Ankyls. Okay? Now, what are the Ankyls? Once again, drawing upon the Invisible College, James Cameron did the best job ever of depicting the Ankyls in the movie The Abyss. How are they described? They're described as avionic, bird-like race of beings, highly evolved very far out of three-dimensional existence to higher densities, but they got bored and missed the fun in the third dimension, so part of them came back down to the third dimension. And that's a strange concept, which is why James Cameron did a fantastic job of depicting that concept. And of course, it was so simple, it was so magnificent, that when I saw the movie The Abyss, I was like, transparency. Half in, half out of three-dimensional existence. Are you there? I don't know. I can touch you, but I can't see you. Okay? Half in and half out of three-dimensional reality. Those beings you see are avionic, bird-like race of beings. Okay? That's the Ankyls in the Abyss. Let's break down the words. You're going to like this. First comes the root, Ankh, also spelled this way sometimes. Okay? Now, let's look at that more closely. What is the shape of an Ankh? Now, some people misinterpret it as an angel. Okay? Not an angel, although the word is validated, you'll see in a minute. Avionic, bird-like race of beings. What is an Ankh? Head of the bird, wings of a bird, tail of a bird. Okay? The Ankh, coming from the term Ankhils, what had happened was Iya went to them and asked them for a little bit of help with the Adapa to modify them a little bit more. They were missing something. And that thing they were missing was the gene for passion. Henceforth, I think, therefore I am. Without the gene for passion, you're a robot. Okay? So put that over here, gene for passion. Gave them the code, the genetic code for passion. They in turn put it into the Adapa, and this is where this elite core starts being created. This elite core becomes known as the Iesu. Okay? What's interesting about Iesu? Iesu, Jesus, Jesus, and also suspected Yahweh eventually. Okay? From Iesu, mispronunciation would be Jesus. From Jesus, Jesus, an even more bastardized term. And then it's also suspected that somewhere along the way the syllables for Yahweh also came from this. What you'll also later on, what you'll also know as the proper name, and I'll explain why later. The proper name for the one you call Jesus Christ is Guru Master Prophet Isa. Isa comes directly from this too. Okay? So put that right next to it, Isa. Alright, which is also used in Turkey. They still use the proper term to refer to that particular prophet. Gene for passion implemented in the Adapa turns them into the elite Iesu. Now what are the Iesu now known as? Okay, they are now known as the anointed one with the gene for passion. The anointed ones. Okay? They are taken into caves, secret caves. Okay, I mean, he is really digging a hole for himself, all right? Since he had a relationship with the Ankhils, okay? Now once again, Ankh, gene for passion. Ankhils also becomes Angels, as in Los Angeles. From Angels you get the word angel. The angel or the Ankhils. This is why you get the confusion about the Ankh being an angel. It's not, it's a bird. But the linguistic derivation is correct. Ankhil. This is why the term angel becomes associated with the term Ankh. It's okay, but it's a slight historical error, okay, linguistically. What also happened too now was that since Iya had a relationship with the Ankhils, that so-called religious device that is called the Ankh today, it wasn't a religious device, it was a technological device, similar to what you call a microphone or a universal communicator from Star Trek's point of view. He used it to communicate knowledge that much faster to the Iesu, the anointed ones. To pound it, because he only had a limited amount of time with these guys before Enlil was looking at the watch like, where the hell is everybody, okay? So to get this knowledge pumped into them faster and faster, he used this device called the Ankh, which is now what you guys call the Ankh, the angel or the Ankhil, okay? And the root comes from that. Now, since he was using the Ankh, he becomes known as the Ankh in association with the Ankhils, and this is how Prince Iya becomes known as the Ankh-E, Enki. So that's where the name Enki comes from, Ankh, okay? Eventually, you know, he was known as the Ankh. Eventually, the I is attached, Anki, okay? So Prince Iya is his real name. Enki is his pen name, okay? So this is how he gets to be known as this, okay? So now, known as Enki, Iesu, all right? All of a sudden, all these words start relating to each other, and they start going in a circular pattern with each other. Enki takes the Iesu into caves. Now, he even, I mean, you know, what he does here is from the perspective of these guys, ultimately abominable. You got to keep that in mind along the way, because there's a word that comes out of this later on that you'll understand why. He goes teaching them. They become the anointed ones. He's using the Ankh, pumping it into their brains, into their genetics, into their cell memory, into their racial memory. This eventually will become the Temple of Solomon and the family of man. Okay. What he did, though, aside from using the Ankh, he also used another process to speed it up. Initially, there was the Arian technology of mind control and brainwashing. Remember what I said over there? Psychological warfare. They used a particular type of crystal technology to help Anu and Enlil and Ea program the Adapa to do exactly what they were supposed to do. Bam, instant brainwashing. Because the mind is no different than the hard drive of your computer. It can be erased. Right? It runs on electricity, so it's easily erased. All right. Well, he goes and turns around and uses it the other way. Okay. So he's using the reptilian. If you were trying to piss off the queens, this would be the way to do it. He uses that same reptilian Arian technology to now pump information into the minds of the Ieyasu even faster. Okay. They become the anointed ones. Enlil, still exhibiting his sadistic labor campaign of destroying the Adapas. One day, Enki, now known as Enki, he's walking through the garden, which is where you get the term Garden of Eden from, and, feeling sorry for the Adapas, because now he's got two classes. He's got the Ieyasu, he's got the Adapas. Decides to go to the Adapas themselves and help them in a different way, okay? Basically signing his own death sentence. But he goes into the garden, finds the Adapas, and starts talking to them. They know who he is. They love him. And he says, how's my brother treating you? And, like, not too good. And you don't like what you're doing. Mm-mm. He says, now you got to remember, once the process was set in motion with the Adapas, the point was, in order to reproduce the perfect slave every time, you had to set up a system of mating. This later on was repeated by the Nazis in terms of controlled genetic mating. Okay? Well, in this particular case, one male Adapa was forced to mate with one male female Adapa all the time. Henceforth, perfect predictability as to what kind of slave offspring would be produced every time. It was a way of manipulating racial memory and cell memory in a slave economy. Okay? And the thing is, the only way to keep that going was to have it in a controlled biosphere environment. That controlled biosphere is, of course, what you read about in the book of Genesis, the Garden of Eden. Okay? This is where you get the concept of an Adam and an Eve. Okay? One male Adapa forced to mate with one female Adapa. Okay? And all of them had to do that. And they were all tagged. All right, so they would remember who they're supposed to have sex with. And at a certain time of the month, at the ring of the bell, they'd say, come and get it. And, they'd all go in there and go at it. And that would be it. All right? Well, the thing was, that was for all the misery that there was, that was the only form of enjoyment that they had. So now, Enki walks into the garden and he says, what if I could show you something that would make your life that much better? He says, you're not going to escape the slave system that you're in. I can't do anything for that. He says, but I can teach you something that will make your miserable life that much more pleasurable. He says, you know that thing you're allowed to do once a month at the ring of a bell? He says, well, here's a magnificent concept. Guess what? You can do that anytime you want, anywhere, with anyone. Okay? All right? So they're thinking about this, right? And they're looking at each other, and all of a sudden the Adapa starts smiling. All right? Well, later on, Enlil's looking around, the Anunnaki are looking around, nothing's getting done. Where the hell is everybody? All right? All right? So Enlil goes into the garden looking for them, all right? And of course now Enki had told them, said, look, I'll teach you this, but you have to promise and make damn sure that my brother does not find out about this. He says, otherwise everybody's screwed. All right? So, yes. So, but as with everything, somebody's bound to mess this up big time, okay? Someone's going to make a mistake. Well, sure enough, someone was caught by surprise, right? Enlil's walking through the garden looking for something. He hears this noise behind a bush, right? So, looks behind the bush and sees a male Adapa fully erect, getting it on with a female adopter that wasn't tagged with the same symbol, okay? At that point, the gig was up. Enlo knew it was his brother. He says, where is that son of a bitch? I'll kill him, right? And this, once that went out, then he found out that not only did he do that, okay, not only did he do that, but he found out that he was also teaching the anointed ones forbidden knowledge, okay? So now he found out about the Iesu, okay? So now he goes on this unholy, massacre, starts just killing off, because at this point now, the adopters have been having sex with everyone. This produces a total screw-up in the genetic structure of slavery, okay? Now you can't tell what kind of product is going to come out, the end results, okay? All these female adopters are pregnant with God knows what. And on top of that, to make matters even worse, a select group was picked to be taught forbidden knowledge. And this forbidden knowledge was, of course, the whys and wherefores of the galactic community and where the adopter came from in the first place. Okay? You're not supposed to be teaching the slave where he came from. Okay? Because that's where Mary Shelley gets the idea for Frankenstein. Okay? The awakening of the beast, and then the beast coming home to the creator to kill the creator. Okay? So he goes on a rampage, killing everyone looking for his brother. At this point, Enki's got to get out of town, all right, real fast. So he takes off, but he also takes off with a whole bunch of the anointed ones, the Iesu. Takes off to what is now referred to as the Pleiades, and proceeds to continue on with the experiment with the anointed ones to produce what's referred to in ufology as the Pleiadians, okay, another branch of something beyond Homo sapient man, all right? Also related to the human race, the family of men. Okay? Some of the anointed ones stayed beside. Some of the Iesu stayed behind to carry on the good fight. Because they knew the adopters were getting slaughtered, their own brothers and sisters, someone had to stay behind. So some of the anointed ones stay behind. Enki, he takes off with most of them, the lion's share of them, to the Pleiades. What happened was Enlil, now with his massive spaceship armada and whatnot, is slaughtering everyone left and right. The anointed ones, the Iesu, are like, we have nothing to go up against this, and we're the only ones who know the truth. We can't afford to go up against him and get killed. So they initiate what is now what eventually becomes referred to as running for the hills. You see this in the movie Braveheart with William Wallace and the Scots. They say, run for the hills, let the British come. When they go back, we'll attack them from behind. This, because you're dealing with primates, apes, gives birth to the term guerrilla warfare. Underground warfare, strike and hit, okay? They go taking off for the mountains. To this day, now they were also, these anointed ones, these Iesu, are also known collectively as the Atom, okay? This is the Atom, okay? It's in the name, Ad-Om. Om, as opposed to ape, which mimics. Om refers to frequency, awakening the beast, the anointed ones, awakening with the gene for passion and forbidden knowledge, okay? And there is a symbolic relationship between the word atom, A-T-O-M, and the fact that these guys were created at the bottom of a test tube, okay? Atom, because atom. Yes, well, there's a definite significance there as well. The Iesu, the Atom, they're still carrying on that good fight today. You don't call them Atom anymore. You don't call them Iesu. You call them by another name. Nowadays, you use the term Yeti, Sasquatch, Bigfoot. Okay? Sasquatch, Bigfoot. That's the Atom. Okay? They have carried on the good fight for today. They are living libraries, just like that of the blue whales of the sea. Okay? Both the blue whales and the Sasquatch are living libraries. That means they have it within themselves, make up their own cell structure, all this key information of true ancient history where the human race comes from, our relationship with extraterrestrial entities, the family of man, people of color and hue as true custodians of the land. They were locked with that nation so that that information would never get lost, and the people of color and hue would be recognized as the rightful custodians of Earth. The revolt went on, endless slaughter. Now, of course, corporation feudalism, slave economy. The Anunnaki went to Enlil and said, look, you're killing off all the slaves that are supposed to be doing the slave labor. You got to stop. So, of course, Enlil, realizing, stops. But what he does is now he realizes he's got to take drastic measures to get the slave population back under control. This whole damn revolt going on. The Yesu running for the hills, he's trying to hunt them down. A lot of them did get killed off. A lot of them survived. He's already got an axe to grind against the Adapas, okay? But he's got to stop killing them. So, just to be a spiteful bastard, he decides to go the other route with propaganda. Once again, using the Aryan technology to reprogram everybody. And what he reprograms them with is he wipes their mind. From that day forward, the term Enki, or Ea, is now labeled as forbidden, as in forbidden knowledge. The tree of forbidden knowledge, okay? He is labeled as forbidden to be spoken. The Adapa, or the slave, is never allowed to speak that name again, and to burn it into their brains in a state of fear and paranoia. He says from this day forward, he will be known as Baal. Okay? Baal. Now, in this type of linguistics, when they wanted to emphasize true despicability, what they did was they added another syllable in front of that, dia. They called him dia Baal. So the person that created the human race was now slandered with the term dia Baal. Dia Baal becomes Diablo, Diablo becomes devil. Okay? Now, in order to have the slave believe this, you have to also have something else on the other side, making it look that much more evil. So, what does he do? Enlil puts himself up on a pedestal, and he says, from now on, you will never utter the term Enlil. From now on, you will call me Gad. Now, from the term Gad comes the term God. So, the devil created you, God destroyed you. That's the message here, okay? This is why this becomes so damn volatile and forbidden, because everything you've learned is asked backwards. The devil was never that bad, and God was never that all-loving, okay? I'm not making him out to be a saint. He had his own selfish methods for doing what he did. But on the other hand, the point is, that which you call the devil and that which you call God are biological brothers tied at the hip in a feudal sibling war, okay? So why the hell are you picking one side over the other when these two assholes were trying to destroy each other in the first place, all right? He's a sadistic pig, doesn't give a shit about you. And him, well, he knew he was going to start a rebellion that nobody could win, okay? But in the end of it all, he is the one that saved our asses with something he did before he left, before he got banished from this kingdom, before he was permanently labeled as Diabol, before he left with the anointed ones. He did something for the Adapas. Okay? He pricked his finger and put his blood into the slave. Now from that day forward, now remember, this combined with this becomes the foundation for the Moorish legacy. In terms of real estate investing, global real estate investing, the throne of power, that drop of blood put into the Adapa created the biggest damn enigma that to this day the entire galactic community is still trying to figure out how to get around it with feudal law. Because by putting royal Syrian blood into the beast, he then gave the beast the right to be custodians of the throne of power, custodians of Earth. It made them the rightful blood heirs of this planet, and if you make them blood heirs of this planet, that means they control the entire kingdom. Okay? That was the ultimate stab in the back to the system, because even the Satar queens couldn't argue against that. So how do you get around it? That's when he starts his whole propaganda campaign, I am God, my brother is the devil, and starts reprogramming all the slaves. Okay? Now, he's got that going on. With this feuding going on, there's another interesting group who was associated with all this along the way, who we haven't mentioned yet. And of course, you know them already as the Greys. Okay? Now, what's the role that they played? Well, with this going on, and with in relation to the Anunnaki Syrians and the Sata Queens, they operated as the SS Gestapo. In fact, they were allowed to walk freely among the population, and they were known as the stone builders at the time, henceforth stone mason. All right? They are in keeping with the idea of a corporate, corporeal body. They are the bean counters of the corporation. They are mathematical, calculating little bastards. Okay? Soulless to the core. All right? They have a very close relationship with reptilian blood, even though they were sent down to keep things in order and spy for the queens to keep these guys in line. Because they knew the feud here, was going to blow up sooner or later. They calculate in their mathematical and logical equations that they can run the whole corporate operation a hell of a lot better in this kingdom than these two imbeciles here fighting with each other. Okay? So they wait. He's thrown out. The slaves are reprogrammed to forget him. Okay? He's in charge by himself now. Okay? But there's an interesting thing that happened. Ea had a son, Marduk. Not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed. Okay? And it's in the name, Marduk. What is a duk? A Syrian dog of war. Mar, well, it's a reference to the god of war. Okay? Marduk, all right, one of the Syrians. The Greys knew exactly how to manipulate the whole situation to their favor. They played both sides against the middle. They went to Marduk, knowing he was a dumbass, but also the son of Prince Ea. They went to him and said, "You see what they did to your father? You want to get even? We'll help you. We'll back you in the next campaign for control." Marduk's like, yeah, because what were the Greys doing? They were banking on inflating his ego because he was too dumb to think any other way. So they blew up his ego and told him, "You're the one who should be in charge, and we'll back you." Marduk leads the revolt against Enlil, throws out Enlil, now takes over middle management with the Anunnaki, at which point the Greys realize that with this imbecile at the head of the game, they can easily take over. So they follow through on their plot, go after Marduk, throw him out, throw the Anunnaki out, lock down the whole damn kingdom, and from that point on, they take over the entire operation. Now, of course, with all this going on, you have to ask yourself, what saved their asses from being eliminated by them? Because this was a total violation of the treaties and relationships for producing a bottom line profit for the corporation. Well, the fact of the matter was, they were sent by the Sata Queens, and after they took over, they went to the Queen and said, "Look, Anu's sons are a bunch of imbeciles ruining your bottom line. If we take over, we'll run everything on a dime, and you'll get your profit every time." So the Greys have been skating by on thin ice ever since then, with the promise that they'll keep the paycheck going to the Queens to keep everybody happy. But of course, this created animosity with Anu, who was the favored one by the Satas. As you can tell, the history of this solar system is like a soap opera on steroids. All right? So you've got that going, a total lockdown on the planet. The Greys take over. Well, something interesting happens here. Okay? From the Greys, they decide, why knock a good thing? They decide to, based on the two-party system that already existed, they reinvent the two-party system. Only in their case, they call it, because of course now they are suddenly thrusted into the position of upper management. They wanted to recede into the background. They needed to reestablish a new two-party system to do all the work for them. So upper management, in this two-party system that's created by them, they invent the Raka Pharaohs, okay, and the Raka Shields, okay. And of course, as you already figured out, from Raka Pharaoh comes the term Rockefeller. From Raka Shields comes the term Rothschild, two-party system, okay. They invented that. Now, they were known as the stone masons, and since they were allowed to walk freely among the population like a Schutzstaffel, they became known as the Freemasons. Greys are the Freemasons, okay? This is why there's always this favoritism towards the pale-skinned abomination that does not belong to the family of man. Why? So they get this far here, okay? Knowing that, in comes the Anquils and the Moorish legacy. The Anquils, who had a relationship with Ea and Ninhursag, saw all this crap going down. And even though they did not have a direct relationship with what was going on, they couldn't exactly step in forcibly. That wasn't their way. They realized where the gene for passion went and where the royal blood went. Okay? They decided, let's do it that way. This serves as the beginning of the concept of guerrilla warfare, operating underground. All right? From the gene for passion, from the concept of the anointed ones, comes the Moorish legacy. That Moorish legacy is represented by the term Temple of Solomon. And it's in the name, just like the word Adam, Solomon. You break it down to 3 syllables, Sol, Oman. Sol is Latin for sun, Om, sound, sound to light. So Om is frequency, and On is Sanskrit for sound to light. Basically, the name Solomon is a linguistic symbolism for awakening the beast. Okay? And of course, the Temple of Solomon is symbolically associated with gold, because gold is the perfect conductor of electricity, which brings us back to the concept of Frankenstein's monster being awakened. Okay? By using gold as a conduit, the beast is awakened. It's a symbolism. Some people argue, oh yes, the Temple of Solomon really exists, there really is the gold. Okay, whatever, but who cares? What are you going to do when you find it? They're going to put a gun to your head and pull the trigger anyway. So, who cares if it really exists? What matters is, towards this legacy, towards the family of man, it must be understood that the Temple of Solomon is a powerful symbolism for keeping the body healthy and pure. Okay? From what had happened here was that you've got the family of man now, inheriting the Moorish legacy, inheriting the legacy of the anointed ones, through the Temple of Solomon, using it as almost like a filter, a spiritual filter. The gene for passion filtered through the Temple of Solomon becomes what you guys know as the Passion of the Christ. Okay? Now, the term Christ, a bastardized term, spelt with CH, which is an Anglo-Saxon English spelling, totally wrong. The original proper spelling of it, it's not someone's last name, it's a title. It's a title for all major prophets. Every major prophet is called a Christ. It is spelled K-R-I-S-T, not C-H. K-R-I-S-T, Muhammad the Christ, Buddha the Christ, Isa, the one you call Jesus, the Christ, okay? Noble Drew Ali, the Christ. Okay? Adam the Christ. This is why you get the concept of the Christ energy coming through the bloodline of the prophets. It came from the gene for passion that was pumped into the anointed ones. Okay? Now, being that the Greys were not stupid. They knew what was still there. They knew they couldn't, even with the Arian technology, they couldn't fully erase that gene for passion. They couldn't get to the anointed ones. They were hiding out. And even with the Adapas, they had to constantly keep them brainwashed, and God forbid they should be taught by the Iesu to wake up and realize their true legacy as custodians of the earth. You don't want the slave population waking up to that. What had happened was that with the Moorish legacy coming out of Africa, Mother Africa, all right? That's an important term because later on it's slandered and erased by the Masonic agenda and therefore called the Dark Continent. All right. What had happened was that there was a certain segment of the population in northern Africa which started becoming very warlike, losing its way with Mother Nature, losing its connection and responsibility. Remember, custodians of the land, responsibility to Mother Earth. This particular population in northern Africa started acting very warlike, troublesome. They lost their way. They began to experiment on themselves, mutilate themselves, to the point where they bled all of the color right out of their skin. No more color, they became the pale skins, what you now know as Caucasian. They became so warlike and such a big problem that the rest of the Moorish people got together and was like, what the hell are we going to do with these guys? You know, they just won't stop. They're going to overtake everything and destroy us. So they decided to banish them. This is where you get the concept of being banished from the Garden of Eden. Okay? They decided to banish them, and by banishing them, they had to pick a spot to stick them. Well, there's only one continent on the planet that doesn't start with the letter A, and that's Europe. It's in the name, your rope. Rope, you hung yourself. Okay? Europe is named after the African queen Europa. Europe was a dead wasteland, and it was used as a transcontinental prison to dump all the assholes who were causing a problem, namely the paleskins. So what happened was they cast it out of Africa because they couldn't stay there anymore anyway. They had burned all the color out of their skin. No more melanin. You can't sit in the sun anymore. I burn like a lobster when I go to the beach. So they had to get out of there anyway for health reasons. There were several reasons. One, they were no longer part of the family of men. Two, they were pale skinned. They couldn't stay in the sun anymore. Three, they were destroying the environment, polluting it, experimenting on themselves in abominable ways, producing these defective genetic offspring that you wouldn't even want to speak of. A good example would be the abominations you saw in Lord of the Rings trilogy, all those disgusting things that were created by Sauron, okay? They dragged them across the deserts of Arabia. This is where the bitterness begins. Their pale skin being scorched by the desert, and dumped them in the cooler, less sun-like atmosphere of Europe, and leave them there. Perfect prison. Why? Because to the north you got snow, to the south you've got the mountain ranges, to the west you've got the Atlantic Ocean, and to the east, lo and behold, out of nowhere comes the Great Wall of China. You have to remember what comprised the Moorish legacy. It was known as the Amexem Empire. Now, the entire Amexem Empire went from Mongolia to South Africa, over to South America, and up through all of North America. They were known as the Asiatic nations. The Amexem Empire, the Moorish legacy. Okay, the family of man. And then you've got this orphan over here called Europe that nobody wanted. Okay? And of course, with the Great Wall of China, the academics tell you, oh, the wall was built to keep the barbaric hordes out, but no one ever bothers to ask who the hell the barbaric hordes were. The point is, it was built to keep them in, so they couldn't go anywhere. All right? And of course, in referencing the mountain ranges, there was one particular mountain range. You got the Sierra, the Nevada, the Caucasus. One particular mountain range called the Caucasus that a lot of them hung around. So this is how the term Caucasian becomes associated with the pale skin. It's not even a real term. Okay, it's like we're using the term Negro to describe black people. It just means black, and that's why it was picked. It has nothing to do with genealogy. Caucasian is also a dumbass term. So this is how those ridiculous things come about. But what had happened was that they were casted out. They were embarrassed. They realized, once they were dumped in Europe in this barren, dead wasteland that meant nothing to anyone in the family of man, they realized what they had done wrong. This is where you get the concept of like Adam and Eve feeling embarrassed and wanting to cover themselves, okay? Whereas before that they ran around naked. But they were so embarrassed about what had happened, they went into this massive psychological denial about the whole thing and started inventing all sorts of other bullshit mythology, monkeys coming down from the tree, even to the idea of being born of a she-wolf, okay? This is what they were grasping at straws because they couldn't admit that they had been banished from the family of man, lost the color from their skin, and were no longer part of that family anymore. And this is the great sin they committed against themselves. This is why they were banished. Well, the idea is, who created a rebellion within the family of... Who created this rebellion in the Moorish legacy? Much the same way as the CIA does it to every country. These scumbags, in an effort to get even with the family of man, because the family of man had the gene for passion, the passion of the Christ, they started that insurgency in North Africa, okay? And this is how they began to experiment on themselves. Now, what were the Greys trying to do? Well, for one thing, they were trying to destroy this. They had a vendetta against that because they knew it came from the Ankyls, which were associated with Ea and Ninhursag. On top of that, they were also looking for a good, obedient slave race. Okay? And what better way to do that than to corner someone who's just been casted out and embarrassed for their own sin. So, the Greys, who themselves, of course, always favor the, yes? Oh, okay. We're going to have to stop, huh? Okay. Well, that's it. Yeah. Okay. The Greys go to the casted out paleskins and they say, do you want to get back on top of the food chain? You want to get even? Because, of course, they didn't learn their lesson, and the Greys knew that by approaching them early on, they would be able to capitalize on that feeling of vendetta and viciousness. So they say to him, we'll put you on the top of everything. If you obey us from this day forward, we will give you all the technology you need to go out there and do one thing for us. Colonize the living hell out of everyone and destroy the family of man. Destroy them, destroy them, destroy them. So from that day forward, those original European paleskins sold out the rest of the human race by agreeing to it, and by agreeing to it in feudal law, that means all of their paleskin descendants were now obedient to that system. And this is why, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Europe shows up on the scene as a world superpower, going out, destroying, colonizing, and massacring everyone in their path. Okay? Doing it to Africa, doing it to the Middle East, doing it to the Western Hemisphere and the Americas. This was their agenda, their motive, their Masonic operation. They were known as the original Freemasons. By gaining the allegiance of the casted out paleskins, they then handed off that mantle to the paleskins. And this is how the extraterrestrial connection of Freemasonry becomes an earthbound Freemasonry. That's where Freemasonry came from, and it was created solely for the purpose of burying the Moorish legacy. This is why when you see this crap on the History Channel and all they talk about is these damn white scholars and academics. Oh, Freemasonry's gone. Yeah, well, if you're asking the enemy, of course they're going to say that, okay? Try asking a dark-skinned black Native American or a black African. See what kind of an answer you get from them. Okay? But we're so busy labeling these people as with bows and arrows and spear chucking that, the so-called established community won't listen. But all the answers are there. You're just not asking the right people. You have to go to the other 70% that represents the majority of the population. So that's where it comes with that. So along the way, these prophets, there's no such thing as a pale-skinned prophet. Prophets are meant for those who are oppressed. 70% of the planet is oppressed by the other 30%. Pale-skinned prophet would be an abomination. Okay? There's no such thing as a pale-skinned prophet. The sad thing that black Masons will never be allowed to learn as lackeys for their white Mason counterparts is that they'll never be allowed to become 33rd degree Masons, because if they did, they'd be given a $10,000 pass by the Vatican to go to the House of Omar in Jerusalem and see the perfectly preserved body of Guru Master Prophet Isa, Jesus Christ, and what they would see is a black man. So there's no such thing as a pale-skinned prophet. This, of course, also helps us disseminate truth from fiction in terms of apparitions and visions and crap like that. If you're looking at, some extraterrestrial, paranormal, or supernatural apparition, and you think you've seen the Virgin Mary or Jesus Christ or Joseph, the first question out of your mouth is, were they white or black? If they were white, they saw something else. They didn't see that. Okay? So, any of this crap you hear about, the Virgin Mother coming in, she's described in this, white, porcelain, pure, Caucasian skin. No. Okay? There was something there, but it wasn't that. If you read the book, Heavenly Lights, the apparitions of Fatima and the UFO phenomena, you'll see how all those so-called religious things, which were skewed towards white Christianity, belong to the realm of alien contact. definitively and scientifically. Okay? But I'll leave it there. I wish I could do more.
No, see,